Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Elaine Anderson, and I am your city manager. Please know that I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for showing up tonight. I appreciate that you're taking the time to thoroughly understand some complicated issues to help you make good decisions about these proposed rate increases. I just have a few introductory remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to my staff experts. So briefly, if you own property in Folsom, you pay utility rates that are the primary source of revenue for the City of Folsom's water, wastewater, and solid waste divisions. Revenues from rates fund utility operations, maintenance, infrastructure, and major capital improvements that help provide these services. We actually haven't adjusted utility rates for many years. The solid waste rates have not been adjusted since 2004, the wastewater rate since 2008, and the water rate since 2011. Our rates are currently among the lowest in the region and would still be among the lowest in the region even with these increases, and we haven't even kept pace with the consumer price index as the years passed. So what we did was we conducted a comprehensive rate study of all city-provided utilities. This was prepared by independent third-party experts, and the study recommends that the City of Folsom increase utility rates in order to meet the ongoing operational and capital expenses of each utility. This was reviewed by the city's Utility Commission and the City Council, and the City Council recently gave us the go-ahead to move ahead with a public notification process required by law called Proposition 218 to determine if the rates should be raised. Tonight's open house is part of that public notification process, along with the mailer you all should have received in your mailboxes. It looks like this. I hope this is familiar to everyone, and if you need a copy of this, we have plenty out in the lobby, or any of our staff here can help you as well. Under Proposition 218, property owners or utility customers don't actually vote with a ballot for or against these rates. If you're okay with the proposed increase, you just do nothing. If you don't want them, you submit a protest in a certain format within a 45-day time period. It's important to note that only one protest will be counted per property. So I point that out because in some cases, for example, someone owns a property and they're renting it out to maybe 1, 2, or even 3 people. So there are 4 potential people that might turn in a protest. Only 1 per address will be accepted. If written protests are received from property owners or customers of record representing more than 50% of the parcels, the city is not allowed to move forward with the proposed rate increase. The City Council can always decrease rates without this whole Proposition 218 process, but if they want to increase them, we need to embark on the process. So how do you protest the proposed rates? If you wish to protest the rates, and you can protest 1 of the rates, 2 of the rates, or all 3 of them, you must turn your protest into City Hall in a specific time period within the 45 days time period, which is actually going on right now through December 10th. The specific format that you have to use is described in the mailer you received, and there's also, we made it super easy, there is a form in here that would be considered a valid protest if you want to fill that out. On December 10th, the city clerk will count protests to water rates, wastewater rates, and solid waste rates separately to see if any has a majority protest. If approved, the rates will go in effect February 1st, 2020. With that, I'd like to take just a few minutes to directly address some questions that we've heard recently, either by conversations with some of you, others not in this room, or that have just been consistently popping up on social media. First of all, will rate increases subsidize the new Folsom Plan area, which is south of Highway 50? I think you're all aware that there is new construction going on south of 50, so it's a common supposition, because it's a coincidence that the homes over there are starting to just pop up just when we're proposing utility rates. So it's a natural conclusion for some that the two are correlated. So the question is, will these rates subsidize that area? The answer is absolutely not. The proposed rate increases will not be used to subsidize utility services for the new Folsom Plan area, which is a development south of Highway 50. The independent rate study, prepared again by these independent third parties, recommended that the city actually create a surcharge for customers in that area south of 50 for the cost of the water supply for that area. The infrastructure to deliver water to the Folsom Plan area was funded by landowners and developers in the Folsom Plan area. We also consistently hear, is the city proposing rate increases in order to pay for other city services? Like, are we bringing in revenue on one side and we're really just trying to pay our bills in other areas that are struggling? The answer to that is no. The city is not proposing rate increases to pay for other city services. Per the requirements of this same state law, Proposition 218, that requires this whole notification process, utilities may not charge more in rates than the cost to provide the utility service. That means proposed utility rate increases match the costs exactly of providing water, wastewater, and solid waste services from now to fiscal year 2024 and would only be used for those needs. Another common question that I've heard and discussed with many of you out there is, so what are you doing to keep utility costs down? Please don't just pass this burden on to us. We want to hear that you're really tightening your belt. Well, the belt is tightened and then some. I can reassure you, we run an extraordinarily lean organization in all three of these utilities, but I want to point out specific cost savings measures we've taken. In the water division, we've implemented a 24-hour shift schedule at the water treatment plant to reduce overtime and standby pay. We are also participating in regional efforts to purchase supplies and materials in larger quantities to reduce per unit costs to the city. In our wastewater division, we're investing in pipeline inspection equipment that can simultaneously clean and inspect the pipeline. And we're also using alternative project delivery methods to reduce construction costs associated with rehabbing and replacing our sewer pipelines. In our solid waste division, the final utility, we're implementing a swing shift in the fleet division to provide vehicle maintenance outside of regular operating hours to make sure our vehicles are up and running when they need to be and not wasting that key time on maintenance. And we're using electronic resources to connect customers to collection schedules, reminders, and service notices. In addition, the city has applied for and received state and federal grant funds to offset costs for utility programs and projects. So a key question also seems to come up over and over again: what happens if the proposed rate increases do not move forward? If the proposed rate increases do not move forward, the utilities will quickly use up their reserve funds. They do have reserve funds, but they will burn through them at a very quick rate, and they will be forced to cover unmet costs in these utilities through the city's general fund. That is certainly a strategy, but I wanted to point out that this would likely impact the city's ability to provide other vital services such as fire, police, parks and recreation, street maintenance, and the public could see reduced levels of service. In addition, the water and wastewater utilities would have to significantly reduce or eliminate reinvestment in capital infrastructure. What is the date of the public hearing for the proposed rate increases? The city will hold a public hearing on the rate increases on Tuesday, December 10th at 6:30 p.m. right next door in City Hall in the council chambers. And again, protests will be accepted up to and through the end of that public hearing, up through December 10th. And so, please go back to this mailer if you want to turn in a protest. At this time, I'm going to turn the podium over to the city's Environmental and Water Resources Director, Marcus Yasutake, who will provide more detail on the rate increases proposed for water and wastewater services.
Thank you, Elaine. Good evening, everybody. Marcus Yasutake, Environmental and Water Resources Director. So our department covers the water and wastewater services for the city and is outlined in this presentation. So what we wanted to do is just give a quick update and a background on what we're doing here tonight and some of the steps that we have taken along the way to get where we were for our presentations to City Council in August, and then again in September, and then tonight, and then what we might be doing going forward for the public hearing. This is just a quick overview of what we're doing tonight. Just wanted to give you an idea of what the current water and wastewater rates are. You'll hear from Dave on solid waste in a little bit. Review what the rate study goals and objectives were when we started this process back in 2017. An overview of how rates are actually set up, so how we develop, as Elaine said, these cost-based rates, which can only fund those costs that it takes to produce or provide the service in which we offer. Review the results of the water and wastewater study, and then, if we have time later this evening, gain feedback from the customer base, or in between now and even up to the closing of the public hearing, get feedback from anybody. And both Dave and I do have our business cards out in the front, so if you'd like to get in contact with us, our business cards are out front. Feel free to give me a call or send me an email. This is just a quick overview of where we are currently today. As Elaine mentioned, the last wastewater rate study was conducted and implemented in 2008, and water in September of 2011. So at that time, we were about $14.55, moved to the current structure of $16.15. And what I'm presenting tonight and what you'll see is on a single-family residential basis. We do have the non-residential information if you would like that, but typically we would present this in a residential basis because that's a significant portion of our customer base. Capital funding at that time was about $2.75 million per year. On the water side, the city was at a flat rate, so in 2012 of $33.55. And at that time, as a residential customer, if you used 500 gallons or 5,000 gallons, you still paid the same amount. That flat rate was converted in 2013 to a volumetric rate. And so what we did in 2012 was we actually provided a comparison of the 2012 usage and what that would look like in 2013 on a volumetric rate. So it gave you an idea, at least for a year, of your water usage, your patterns, as well as what you might anticipate to pay for the year coming up. So if there are things that you could do to reduce water usage, that would then help lead to reducing your water bill. Timeline here, as Elaine mentioned, there's been quite a bit of work we've done over the past couple years in terms of presenting. Is anybody else getting feedback? Not quite sure if it's just me. Maybe I'll stand a little further away from the microphone. So discussed with our utility commission. We had about 12 meetings from June of 2017 to June of 2019. In July of this year, the utility commission recommended moving forward with some information to our city council. We did provide this information in a utility bill. It was a message in the utility bill that we were going to speak in front of city council and present the information to city council, which we did in a public workshop on August 27th. We received feedback from city council at that time and also some discussion and recommendations from city council. We brought the information back in September to the city council as well. And at that time is when city council authorized us to issue the Proposition 218 notice. And that's what Elaine had referred to earlier. We did have a Facebook Live plan, and I forgot to take that out. We did not end up doing that one here, but now we are here tonight at the open house. The August 27th workshop, we discussed with city council the goals and objectives, the cost-based rates, the analysis of water and wastewater requirements, as well as solid waste. We answered questions, and whether it's from the public or from city council, just on the revenue requirements and what this means in terms of setting rates for water, wastewater, and solid waste. We discussed the rate design, and then we discussed what the future rate structures would look like on a residential and non-residential basis. And so at that time, again, City Council directed staff to bring this back to the 9/10 meeting. And then at that meeting, we had further discussion, and then were given approval to issue the Proposition 218 notice. And so I'm just going to give a quick overview of the rate study goals and objectives. A lot of this information is the same for water, wastewater, and solid waste. We obviously just provide a different type of service, so we look at things a little differently. But the outline and the idea of what we present is a lot of it's the same that we looked at for each utility. But obviously we need to provide sufficient revenue to fund water, wastewater, and solid waste utilities. Provide funding for capital reinvestment. So for water and wastewater, that's pipelines, pump stations, water tanks, that type. Dave will get into the solid waste requirements, so that's more vehicles and trash cans. But we do have to fund for each of those in each utility. Obviously maintaining an adequate reserve. This was very beneficial to the city between 2014 and 2016, when we were required by the state to reduce water consumption. And water consumption is how we were making our revenues at the time, or in this case, because we were required to use less, we were actually losing revenues. But fortunately for us, we had a strong reserve at the time. We were able to use that reserve to offset revenues that were lost because we were selling less of our product. But what we do want to make sure that we maintain is that adequate reserve in case something like that were to happen again. So to have the ability to use that reserve for emergency purposes, emergency projects, and times where the revenues don't meet what your expectations were because maybe another drought comes along, and we know that's going to happen. We don't know when, but to have that reserve level in there is critically important for us. And then we do have a requirement on the water side is to meet debt service. So there was a couple of projects to back in the 80s and 90s to expand the water treatment plant and the pipeline taking water from Folsom Dam to the water treatment plant. Those were items that were issued debt for us to cover those costs. So we do need to make sure that we are repaying those loans essentially, and there's a certain requirement by the creditors that we need to keep in order to refund or repay those loans. So that's also included in the water side. We don't have any of that on the wastewater side. As Elaine mentioned, Proposition 218, it's a requirement, constitutional requirement in which we have to issue these notices, and there's certain requirements that the fees have to be a reasonable cost of providing the service and also a proportional cost. So one sector, so the non-residential sector, can't pay more for the exact same unit than a residential customer. So everybody has to have a proportionate share of what it costs to deliver, that gallon or that 1,000 gallons of water to your residence or to your business, and the same on the wastewater side to move that wastewater through the city system. So it has to be reasonable, it has to be proportional. We can't offset costs by raising or having a higher rate on one sector than another. And then the studies provide then the cost basis for the unit costs for developing this. So then we look at the residential sector, and you can break that down into single-family residential, condos, mobile homes, multifamily, and we do the same thing on the non-residential side. So different businesses have different use patterns and different demands on the system, and then we can appropriately allocate the cost across all those customer bases. And so that gets into how we set the cost-based rates. So we look at the revenue requirements. So we look at that for each utility and identify what are the revenues needed to support the operations and maintenance, the capital reinvestment, and if we have it, like we do in the water, the debt service, the cost of service. So then we're able to break that down into, okay, what does that cost the city for each utility to provide this service to each particular customer class, so the residential and the non-residential. And then we further break that down and develop the actual rate design, which is the structures that we have proposed in the mailer that you have. And so that's the process that we have to go through for each one of the utilities in order to actually set and develop a rate structure. So what do the rate adjustments include? So it includes current and future staffing levels, memorandum of understanding. So these are the agreements between the city and the different bargaining units or unions that work with the city. So identifying just what those costs are and what future cost of living requirements are in those, and then actual salary costs and wages, increase in utility costs, chemical costs, equipment and materials that we just use to operate on a day-to-day basis, retirement or CalPERS adjustments that we get from finance, so those are included in the utility rates, vehicle replacement, a little different for our utility fleet than it is for solid waste, but Dave will explain what those are, but ours are for our utility service trucks, backhoes, camera inspection equipment for our sewer system, those types of replacement. We do have a water meter and meter reading equipment replacement fund, so we know that the meters that we currently have throughout the city at some point in time will need to be replaced, so we are putting money aside for future projects. So instead of asking for debt service or a loan, in year 6 or year 8, we'll have what we try to do is do a pay-as-we-go type of program so that we have the cash on hand in order to develop and deliver the projects. And then capital reinvestment, just to replace the aging infrastructure, whether it's the water or sewer lines within the city. And then, as I mentioned, debt service. And I do want to point out, like Elaine mentioned, the cost and the rates do not include service or infrastructure or water supply for south of Highway 50. As Elaine mentioned, if you just look at this chart here, the yellow line here is just the present revenue. The blue is O&M, or purple. The lighter blue is debt service, and the red or maroon color is capital replacement. And you can see, just if we did nothing between year 2021 and 2022, we would actually only have enough revenues to cover O&M and debt service and not be able to reinvest in any capital replacement. And if we go further out, we get to a point, in year 2023 where we're starting to not be able to cover a significant portion of the debt service, which the city is required to do. So that's a projection on the water side. Water requirements, the summary. So as Elaine mentioned, the study did recommend that rate adjustments were necessary. They're reflective to cover the annual water O&M expenses, which includes the debt service, obviously to include and fund the capital infrastructure requirements or renewal and replacement for our water and wastewater infrastructure, and then to meet ending reserve targets of about 40% to cover potentially any unforeseen expenses, capital projects that you're not aware of that become an emergency project, and in potential years where the revenues aren't sufficient because of possibly drought considerations or state requirements to not use the amount of water that we could be able to. So this next slide just shows what the current and potential rates look like. So you'll see presently on an average bill, which is about 16 CCF or 100 cubic feet, 1 CCF is about 750 gallons. That's the average bill, $32.28. What this looks like between February 1st of next year and then July 1st of 2021 is about a $39 bill. So about $7.58 is the increase. And what was recommended by the Utility Commission and what we presented to City Council was to hold this rate structure hold the rate structure constant for essentially 2.5 years, and then make another adjustment in July of 2021, which would move the $39.86 bill up to $44.24, using that same average. So in total, it's a little less than $12 on the water side. And this is the non-residential, so I don't know how many here are non-residential customers, but this also has the various costs for the non-residential customers. No, this was an average for, we actually looked at metered residential data and looked at it for 2016, 2017, and 2018. And the average usage, if you took your entire usage over a year, divided it by 12 months, the average was about 15.9 something CCF, so we just rounded it up to 16. You will see a difference, or you should, in the winter times where it should be less than 16 CCF, and you will see a difference in the summer times where it is greater than 16 CCF. What we did not do was do this on a monthly time step, because this table would be a lot bigger and a lot more cumbersome to read, but we can work with you and show you, okay, based on the new rate structure, if you looked at your 2018 going into a certain part of 2019, and you wanted to look at it on a monthly basis, using this, you'll be able to identify what your monthly rates might be. This is just an average. It's not going to be specific to each customer, but it's an average using an entire year's worth of data and dividing by 12 months. But you are correct. It's not going to show what your January, February, March bill, it's not going to be $39.86, and your August, September, July, August, September bill is not going to be the $39.86. It all depends on your water usage. So again, this is just an average over the entire year. It's not specific to any one customer. It's an average of the 17,500 residential accounts that we looked at. Depends. I mean, if you have a house built after 1991, you had a water meter installed. If you did not, we installed about 5,200 water meters in 2007, 2008, and I want to say part of 2009, and then started billing in January of 2013. So just to give you an idea, and there's a chart in the back as well that's probably maybe a little easier to read after this, but this is just a regional rate comparison. The red line is the average of all the regional rates. You can see here the city currently at the $32.28, going up to a little less than $40. And again, this is just on the average. It's not a monthly time step. This is just based on using 16 CCF as the water usage. If, as Elaine pointed out earlier, we looked at the consumer price index, current rate should be about $45.16. If you just used the consumer, if you just based it on a consumer price index and multiplied the current rate.
The CPI that's happened in the last 10 years, it's going to happen in the next 5 years. These rates are exceeding, but you're talking about increasing and exceeding that. Right?
No.
Well, they absolutely are. The rates are going up, absolutely. You're like anywhere from 50% to 200% increase across the board in all these rate increases over 5 years. There's no CPI that's happening like that. No.
Okay.
Tell me there is.
I don't know what the CPI will look like in 5 years, but it may.
You're actually arguing the CPI is going to be going that high.
No, I'm just saying I don't know what the CPI is going to. And you may be right. It may not be what it is in 5 years.
This chart is basically saying, well, look at us. It's okay to raise it because everybody else is higher.
No, honestly, that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is just regionally, when you look at our costs and our rates, we're not, I guess, out of alignment with where the region is. And none of us are all.
That's only the first increase.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. All those charts show on 1 year, what will be in 2021 or 2020.
Yes.
It doesn't say, if you draw the lines where they're going to be in 2024, they're way up there.
And it may be if everybody else held static. And this is just looking at static in 2020. Now, we can go by.
I thought these charts were biased, skewed to the lowest number, as opposed, it should have showed a range. It should have showed, well, in 2024 it'll be up here, 2020 it'll be down here. I mean, to me, when you only show one side of it, that kind of bothers me, because
They're trying to sell it.
you're trying to sell it.
Okay, so 2024, I'm sorry, I apologize. 2024, it's going to be roughly $44. So right here, right in here would be 2024. And that's assuming then all these others are staying constant. So we can, go through the effort and make charts that show 2024 with all the other utilities. I just don't think that all of them have 2024. Okay, so I guess,
Yeah, why don't you just repeat again what happens in 2024 then, since that's the question?
yeah, so 2024, right? So, I'm sorry, this is wastewater. $2024, we're looking at the average bill of $44, correct? At least here. So if we go to this chart, so if we go to this chart, 4480 is right in here. That's where the graph would be, which would stop probably right here where, real close to this bar here.
But if the assumption is that everything remains static, then your comparison doesn't make sense, because if you're saying by the year 2024, you're going to be at 44, then you should be applying CPI to the rest of the utilities there and saying, what will they be at in 2024? Then you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges, because right now you're trying to say what the city of Folsom may be looking at versus what the rest of them are looking at. You're trying to sell us on the fact that you need to rate it.
And that's,
If that makes sense.
yeah, it makes sense, but we did not go and look at the others. You could do just a straight CPI.
I mean, the people who provided this information to you should have also done that, so you have something to present to us as what the rest of the utilities are doing. I'm just saying, you're limiting your information on what you provide to us and saying, hey, this is what we need, but in comparison to the rest of them, where are they going to be?
And there's a lot of different factors that go into what other people need and what other agencies need. That would be us making some assumptions on what their capital replacement needs are, what their regulatory requirement needs are, which we did not do. And I'm going to be honest with you, we did not look at what all these other agencies on here, we did not go look into, okay, what is their 10-year capital projection going to be? Because one, that doesn't impact what our rate analysis needs to cover in terms of what the city and each one of our utilities needs to do to operate. It's just a comparison. It doesn't have a purpose of providing, okay, this is what this year means versus year 2024. This was honestly, if in this first year, in 2020, that's what the comparison would look like based on what the city's proposed rate structure would look like versus what these other agencies' existing rate structure is.
And if none of them increase, which they likely will increase actually over time.
Correct. This is just looking at a one-year snapshot. Yes.
Whatever it is you were trying to do with it, I ain't sold, so
I'm sorry, what's that?
come on.
Okay.
So whatever it is you were trying to do with that chart, I'm not sold.
Okay, thank you.
You show a difference between the main and the east area. Is that differential going to continue?
So the east area will typically have about a $4 differential moving forward as well. How long? Until
How long will that differential remain?
it will remain until the city
Purpose and not justification.
Okay, so how long? It will continue beyond this time period that we're looking at now. The justification is, so part of the city, which is the east area, Empire Ranch, Parkway, part of Broadstone, back in probably the early to mid 90s, there's a requirement to find a source of water to serve that development. And so that amount of water, which is a 7,000 acre feet, which is a contract that the city has with the United States Bureau of Reclamation, that comes at a certain cost. And so the land, or at the time the landowners paid for it, but now each customer in the east area pays a surcharge to cover the costs of that water. So that will always be there unless that contract of water goes away, which if it went away, you wouldn't have water to serve that part of the city. So I can't speak for future city council actions or decisions, but I don't think that that contract or water will go away because you do have a demand out there.
Just like the South 50s and how we surcharge as well.
Correct.
There are a lot of times that people are- Is there a pool premium? I think I have a pool premium on my bill for having a swimming pool.
Not on the water side, and there shouldn't be one on the wastewater side. Typically, we only potentially add anything if you're discharging, but I'm not aware. We don't have any pool premiums set in this rate study.
I'm trying to look at my bill.
So,
I have a swimming pool, I'm not aware of any.
yeah.
premium. Okay, yeah, I'm not here, yeah.
Can I go back to that gentleman's question about the surcharge for those 3 areas?
Yes.
I'm reading from I live in Folsom Ranch, and I'm reading from some information about water supply for Folsom Ranch, the new park. And it says here, in exchange, the water supply for existing residents of the city was improved, and the $1 million annual surcharge being paid by existing residents in the Parkway, Empire Ranch, and Broadstone neighborhoods would be borne by the landowners in the plan area. Is that the same surcharge?
No, so there was prior to the current situation we're in now, before the landowners purchased the 5,000 acre feet and are paying or would be paying a separate south of 50 surcharge, the Empire Ranch Broadstone area was paying a surcharge of about $12.20 some cents. So that got reduced to the $4.28 that you pay on a residential basis now, and that difference, that $8 difference, has been shifted, and we'll see it's in, not necessarily in here, but it's in the documentation. It's about $9.28 now from the time it was originally set in place. That's what that difference is what the landowners and residents or non-residential customers south of Highway 50 will be paying. And so that's part of this package as well for approval. That's not currently on any of their bills yet. That's getting covered by the landowners, but if city council does adopt these, that will be on the landowner or the residential and non-residential bills south of Highway 50 or Folsom Plan area, Folsom Ranch. So it's kind of a similar picture on the wastewater side. Really, as I mentioned, there's no debt service, so at a certain time frame, we'd only be covering O&M expenses at our current and present rates. So we just want to point out that that's what the current rate structure would support moving forward. So we'd get to a point in time where we just would not be able to reinvest in capital infrastructure, replacement of sewer pipelines, sewer pump stations within the city.
Projections.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It's based on a lot of assumptions on the projections, which I looked a little bit at the details of that HDR study, and those assumptions are ridiculous.
Which ones?
Salary increases and PERS for one. What's for two? I mean, how do you justify 5% a year salary increase?
They get to make their own
We-
raises. You can make your own raise. You'd raise it just like they do all the time.
But they actually don't get that. They
There's
won't,
9 people
there's
that
no
make
COLA that's been increased.
$300,000 a year or more in the city of Folsom. 9 people make over $300,000 a year. There's 67 that make more than $200,000 a year.
Well,
It's
that's-
ridiculous.
This, what this is basically to pay for their retirements.
You know, they got all the power. They're never going to listen to us. I mean, it's just sickening. $30,000 a year comes out of my paycheck for taxes. Then I pay another $7,000 a year for property taxes. Then I pay electricity, this stuff, all that other stuff. Okay, I haven't even had fun yet myself. I drive a 1997 Ford Ranger, cost me $6,000 in the year 2000. In the last 15 years, I've paid $75,000 for property taxes, not to mention all my other mortgages and stuff. Okay, and you got city employees making $330,000 a year? That's ridiculous. If we had one that was worth that, they would solve this
So if I could maybe give you some insight, and I think maybe it might have been lost in the Prop 218 requirements.
No, Prop 218, how about the postcard from last summer when you guys sent it out that you were raising increases then? And then, it was a big error, the 70,000 postcards go out, and who got fired over that? You guys have been thinking about this for a long time.
So to answer your question about, you said the salaries are very high on some of the city employees. Prop 218 can I finish? So Prop 218 is very specific. These rate analyses are only for those employees that work in this sector of the city. So this is only, under his rate analysis, they're only the employees that work in the water division go to the water rates. The folks that work in the sewer division go to the sewer rates. For me, in solid waste, it's only employees and those that work within the solid waste.
Increasing their pay on the assumption is 5% per year. That ain't happening.
Those,
You have not increased, if you increase people's salaries by 5% on average in the last 5 years, in a year.
I believe so. I believe that's part of the bargaining units that was discussed early on as the,
There's no COLA that does that. COLA's not been possible, been that high.
no, I think, so
This is basically to catch up on PERS.
let me answer your first question about the 5%. So within the bargaining units and the salary schedule within the city employment, there are merit increases and standard year-over-year COLAs. They're merit increases, they're not necessarily COLAs.
It ain't 5%.
So yes, they are 5%. On many of the employees, they're 5%.
No, on average, across the board, in the last 5 years, have you had 5% on average?
For many of the employees, yes.
No,
Out-
on average, this is a rate analysis across an average of the whole group.
Well, that's why these are projections looking into the future, and we
Why
anticipate,
would they be 5%?
that's the structure of the agreements with the bargaining
Well,
units.
the agreements can change based on the staffing levels.
Correct.
Meaning, if you're like increasing rates too much for people beyond the CPI increase over the next 5 years, this is just crazy increases over the next 5 years. Maybe you'd look at saying, well, maybe we don't need to staff as high. Maybe we don't need to have all this fucking pay going up. Sorry.
We understand,
But the big percentage increases are in PERS, and you're catching up on the PERS, because you know how these government, you know how they retire? They retire 90% plus, they retire with that kind of pay at the rate they were earning when they retired. That's what this is going to pay for.
All right, so
okay, so
if I may,
Here's getting that kind of pension. Nobody in the private sector and nobody who's got on a fixed income is getting that kind of income.
okay, so if I may, I'm going to continue
Yeah,
with
let's
the
just continue
presentation, just for the sake of others that may want to hear the rest of what we have to go through, and we still haven't gotten to solid waste, which I don't want Dave to lose out on his time by me taking it all. So again, this is the same information that I covered on the water side, so I won't necessarily repeat it. What I will point out is this is what the proposed rate structure looks like on the wastewater side. And again, this is an implementation in February of 2020, then holding steady until July of 2021, July of 2022, and implementing another rate increase at that time, and then holding steady again until we decide that we have to come back and look at the analysis or do another analysis. And this is again on the residential side. On the non-residential side, this may not impact you in terms of you on the residential side.
They pass their costs along to us.
What I'm saying is this would not necessarily impact you from what you pay as a resident for your particular property. Yes, businesses may decide to pass. Okay, so this is just the non-residential customer class and what the proposal is. So if you're a non-residential customer in here, this is what you would be looking at for your rates. That's what I meant by this isn't a residential particular number. You had a hand up?
The banks need to be paying the highest tier. Bakeries, why are we punishing the bakeries? Okay, bars should be like the next highest. It's ridiculous. Churches, now, they get the money for free, folks. Okay, you can raise it on them, trust me.
We can't put of customer class out of proportion to what they use the system for. I can't arbitrarily say, well, you churches, you get money by passing the hat on Saturdays or Sundays, and say, okay, well, you should pay more.
Justify the rates there.
What's that?
How can you justify the rates there?
These? Well, these are all proportionate to what their impact is on the system. So how much of the sewer pipe do they use? How much of the wastewater pump stations do they use? So,
A bakery is just hammering the system out of town compared to an auto dealership? That's ridiculous. There's how many
Okay.
thousand cars out there that they're washing with good, clean water? They're not recycling their water on these cars.
and so that will hit them on the water usage side. And if they're,
These prices are hooked up with friends in these businesses.
okay, well, I can guarantee you it's not hooked up on Friends of the Business. It's actually based on an EPA study. So I'll move on from that one.
Can I ask a question? How much of this wastewater cost is from the Sacramento area sewer district allocated to you versus how much of it is you got?
So I'll get into that right now. Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District does not allocate any cost to the city. They do allocate costs to customers within the city. And currently on the residential side, it's $37. So out of this total bill here of what we're proposed to go to, this 57, $37 of that is
So my
from
question
regional
is,
sand.
These rate adjustments, do they include either SRCSD or SASD?
No,
It's all,
they are separate entities with their own rate structure.
but it comes on a single bill.
That is correct.
So none of this is from them. All of this is outside their costs.
This number that you see in these tables are strictly City of Folsom. No other agency, no other entity, which includes Regional Sand and SASD.
But we have that on our bill. So how does it,
Yes, you have it on your bill, but it is not impacting the City of Folsom's rates. We're not taking Regional Sand's costs and then applying it to our formula to distribute costs.
I just don't understand what part SASD does versus what you guys do. I don't like the.
Well, the City of Folsom itself is what we call a collection system. So we don't have any wastewater treatment. So the wastewater that is generated within the city moves out into a large pipeline in Folsom Boulevard. At a certain point in Folsom Boulevard, that becomes a regional sand utility or infrastructure. That pipeline all the way down to Elk Grove. In Elk Grove, they have a regional wastewater treatment plant where they treat and discharge into the Sacramento River. So they actually, their cost of $37 a month on the residential side includes all the maintenance for all that transmission from that point down.
But SASD does charge too for some part of the sewer network, because that's on our bill as well.
So SASD may impact customers that are like in the auto mall area, but there shouldn't be a City of Folsom resident that has an SASD charge to it. So I don't know how SASD might be hitting your bill, but we can chat and figure out why SASD might be hitting your bill. But if it is,
Well, I don't know, it could just be sewer residential, that's the line, I don't know.
sewer residential is not SASD here
Big, okay.
in the city. So this will only apply to you if you are purchasing a house or live in the planned area south of Highway 50. So again, what we were talking about earlier, similar to what the current East Area surcharge is now, the way this is developed is there is a certain cost for the actual water for the planned area, which is currently today about 1.78 million. So that cost is then distributed amongst the property owners, and you can be a residential property owner or a non-residential property owner, and that then is added to the bill. On the residential side, we're looking at $9.28. On the non-residential side, it's about 85 cents per 100 cubic feet. So this only applies if you live or your business is in the planned area south of Highway 50.
This is for water.
Correct. And there's no difference for wastewater because there's no wastewater surcharge. So it would only impact the water bill.
Where is the south of 50 getting the water from?
Folsom Reservoir, Folsom Lake.
But
No, that's not what Measure W stated.
Didn't say they're gonna get their water from somewhere else.
No, I can provide you with the Measure W language
That'd be good.
so that you have it. I have a cut of it on my desktop, so I can get you that information, Patty. Yes.
Just to be clear, so this $9.20 per month surcharge is in perpetuity and they'll continue.
Correct, unless the city decides at some point that there's some other water source that would serve that area, but right now, no, there's nothing that we are contemplating.
And it's like approximately 2/3 of what the 3 other districts were paying as a surcharge, it's being transferred, right?
That's correct. Yeah, because the prior surcharge was a little over $12 for the east area.
Portion of it is being now paid by folks in.
So the plan area is now covering the full cost of the 5,000 acre feet of water, and then the east area surcharge covers that other contract that I was talking about that's about 7,000 acre feet. But the cost of that water is just less than what the 5,000 acre feet for the plan area south of 50 is. And so we just basically switched the cost.
Could you clarify something here? There was a difference between the rates on this sheet and the rates presented up on the screen a minute ago. Particularly with the per unit cost of products and whatnot. In here it says per unit is 3,000 square feet, but there's fixtures.
Yeah, so there was an error in that brochure. It's actually supposed to be a per fixture or per fixture unit cost. So what we do is at each park location, you identify, okay, how many restrooms are there, whether it's a bathroom or, a toilet or a urinal, dishwasher, sinks, et cetera, at the different parks, and that's how their impact to the system is calculated. So we use that. So it's a written error on the sheet. So instead of saying per 1,000 square feet, it's supposed to say per fixture unit. And so yes, it was a mistake that we caught, unfortunately, after we sent this out. But the numbers don't change in terms of the 82 cents and moving up from next year. So with that,
All
I'll
right.
turn it over to
All right, I'd now like to turn the podium over to Dave Nugent, who is our Public Works Director, who's going to talk to you about the solid waste rate side of things.
So good evening. Thank you. Dave Nugent again with Public Works. So solid waste is within the Public Works Department. And tonight, let's see if I can make sure I don't get this backwards. Uh-oh. There we go. Pushed the wrong button. So the presentation overview tonight is I'll just be covering what the city's responsible for solid waste, some of the major impacts to what's driving the expenses, the rates that are going to be proposed, and some of the questions. As far as the Prop 218 process, Marcus covered that. It's essentially identical for any utility, that we look specifically for the services or the commodity that's provided by that utility and the employees working on those utilities, and that's what's projected in the rates and forecast, and that's how we come up with the expense side of the equation. Then we go through the rate analysis to determine the revenue side that's needed to meet those expenses. So I'll get into that, but I'm going to go over the Prop 218 rather quickly so that I just don't repeat everything that Marcus has done. So for solid waste, the responsibilities are kind of threefold, as shown in the Venn diagram there. For the disposal of waste, we're mandated to do it in a safe, sanitary, and environmentally acceptable manner. These are done through many state mandates, and I'll get into those and try to explain what has driven the costs up so dramatically in such a short amount of time. The public health side is obvious. We're mandated to pick up weekly because of items in the garbage would rot and create flies and other vectors and other issues. So that's why we're required to pick those up weekly. I guess the most important thing to note is a lot of the state mandates, in fact, all of them, are unfunded mandates. We're told to do this, and we have to figure out how to go about providing that service. And our only real option for the majority of those costs are to turn to the ratepayers and figure out, how do we do this? In that process, though, I do want to assure you, we look to do the most efficient way we can. And Elaine had mentioned it in her opening remarks. We are a very, very lean crew that runs the solid waste division, as well as the other departments in the utilities. So the unfunded mandates. This all started back with AB 939, the Integrated Waste Management Act in 1989. I won't go through these in depth, but if you'd like to know more about these, we do have subject matter experts here that can answer any of your questions in some of these mandates and what they really entail. So I'm just going to hit the highlights on these. This is the initial mandate that came out of the state saying we must divert our garbage going to the landfill by 50% by the year 2000. We have met that. That's essentially created our recycling and green waste recycling programs. That's what kind of kicked that all off. That was later revised under another assembly bill, or might have been a Senate bill, I'm not exactly sure which, but had increased that diversion rate to 75% by next year. AB 32 is the Global Warming Solutions Act, which mandated construction demolition and recycling in 2006. This doesn't have a lot of impact on residents, but it impacts what we do on our commercial side, and a lot of our roll-off accounts there's an extreme amount of compliance reporting requirements that are mandated by CalRecycle. Oh, there we go. I guess I got it pointed at that. I apologize for that. I think my battery might be going. There it goes. Did I do that, or did you do that? Okay. So AB 341 is commercial recycling, and this mandated that all businesses and multifamily complexes that generate over 4 cubic yards of garbage had to have a recycling program. They mandated that the cities or the jurisdictions that collect those materials had to provide that program, do the education and outreach, and also do the monitoring and reporting back to the state. Still not going. Oh, I'll do a reach. It might be just a distance thing. AB 1826 is very similar to the previous one, but this is focusing more on the organics. So materials that are like food waste is essentially what it's really trying to go after. Another mandate. AB 1594 is it's a diversion restructuring, essentially. So currently we can use our green waste materials. All of our leaves and grass clippings and branches can be used at the landfill for what's called alternative daily cover. As of January of next year, that's no longer allowed, so we have to figure out another way to dispose of or divert that material out of the landfill. And the most recent one, Senate Bill 1383, I'm actually going to be giving a presentation to our city council to update them on what's coming. And it's important to note that these last two mandates are not even included in our rate study. So that these two are coming, we know they're coming, but we don't know the dollar amounts and the impacts for those. So there is a possibility that we'll be back again to cover the cost of these programs. That is correct. You're absolutely right. And this is the residential organics recycling that's mandated. So by 2022, we will be mandated to provide organic recycling to residents and all businesses in the city. So the recycling market, here's another.
Just briefly explain what organics recycling means.
Yeah, so the organics recycling under the last Senate bill there, it's all your food waste, all your yard waste, all your tree trimmings, leaves, any I'm gonna get this word right, putrescible items need to go and be recycled. So anything that can rot, that's,
Does it mean get another can? Or the,
well, those are all things we're currently trying to sort out with the state. How is that operation gonna work? And, you know, it's an interesting topic because if all the rotting material that we're mandated to pick up weekly in your garbage is no longer in there, are we mandated to pick it up weekly anymore? So are we gonna be allowed to simply flip-flop our biweekly green waste with our weekly garbage and go biweekly garbage? We don't know those answers yet. That's why we can't forecast exactly what the mandate's gonna be. It's all about compost. Yeah, there'll be, right. But we've got a lot of leaves and tree, you know, decompost all, you know, there's a lot of, yeah. Marie can probably answer that.
Let me see if this is working. So the organics also includes food, soiled paper, and food that you wouldn't put into your compost bin, like meat and bones and fat and things that wouldn't go in your compost, we would then recycle. Right now, our goal is to have that collected with the green waste so that there's no additional can that you would have to have at your house.
Okay. So the recycling market crash, I'm sure everybody's heard this through the news and the state of recycling in the United States and not just California. I will say one thing about California is we're mandated to continue the service, even though many states throughout the country are simply landfilling it. We don't have that option. So one of the major impacts to the expenses in the solid waste has been the China National Sword. The National Sword is a policy implemented by China last year that set strict, nearly unattainable recycling mandates on the materials going to China. We are mandated to continue the recycling effort. And because of the mandates, our current processor has, in fact, all processing facilities in the state had to renegotiate their contracts and had to look at, you know, how do they do their business to meet these requirements, which means they had to slow down their sorting line, they had to invest in higher technology to do the mechanical sorting, and they also had to provide additional staff to actually pick out the garbage and the items that aren't recyclable. And directly related to that, going backwards again, sorry. So here's the key point. In the years prior to the National Sword, the average revenue, now this is revenue that was coming in from selling of the material, was about $465,000 a year. Since the China National Sword and the crash, that revenue has now turned into an expense of $671,000 a year. And that's about a $1.1 million swing in our budget, just in our operating. So to kind of give you an order of magnitude of what that looks like, if we were to pass that expense on to every resident in the city, that's about a $4.11 per resident increase, just in the recycling. That's not even touching all the other mandates that we have to comply with and the costs that keep going up for disposal. This does not want to work. So I'm going to briefly go over this. A lot of this is what Marcus had covered on how we did the rate study and how we set the rates. I did want to touch a little bit on the services that we currently provide, the residential collection of trash, recycling, and green waste. We have bundled rates, which include household hazardous waste, bulky waste pickup, and a second green waste and a second recycle can. And we do offer commercial services 7 days a week. And we've said this before, this does not include anything south of Highway 50. This is only our existing customer base. Any of the garbage trucks that we need in the future and any of the drivers that we need, that's all covered in the specific plan infrastructure fee that's paid for by the development going on south of 50. So once that capital cost is put into place, the rates that they're using and being charged would then cover the replacement of all those vehicles. We determined, I'm glad this is working, determine the revenues and make sure they're consistent with the cost of services, and Marcus had said, developed a rate study, and then analyzed the structuring of the potential rate increases. If I can get this, there we go.
So this is all going with the,
Yes.
can you speak up a little bit?
She said it's all north of 50.
So, what this cost increase though is going to include servicing of South.
So any resident that comes online currently, they'll be paying the same rates. There's no different rate differential for service north or south of Highway 50. What this does not include are those initial capital startup costs for, when we get enough residents that would require an additional garbage truck or two for recycling. Those are all paid for already by the development. They pay all those upfront costs. And then and built into the rates is the replacement of those vehicles over time. Everybody's rates. All of Folsom. Right. So I don't want to get into the graphs and what they represent. This was something that came up from our analysis, and we looked at, had we simply followed the consumer price index from 2003, year over year, where would we be sitting right now? And that turns out in 2019, it's right about $45.53. But we had not raised rates in the last 15 years. And that was a big indicator. So if you look at our proposed rates over the next 5 years, the upper end of that will be $45.75. So we'll be just back to probably where we should have been all along.
I disagree with that one. What about efficiencies and finding ways to cut costs?
And you're exactly right. And that is one of the things we've been doing for the past 15 years. Being as efficient as possible, pushing out our vehicle replacement and squeezing as much as we can out of our vehicles. It's exactly why we have not raised rates.
Why can't they keep going?
Because we're at the point now.
Things that you said that are imposed on us?
They have new thresholds that are coming online. So the 75% diversion means we have to change how we're doing our recycling. The organics that's coming online, we're already, part of what's built into this is some staffing for that upcoming, but we don't know what the cost of that actual service will be. But we do know we have education to do.
You can claim all the efficiency you want, do all the good job that you want. All I know is, over the next 5 years, my bill is going to more than double in total. I don't know how you can even begin to claim efficiency with that.
But farmers are making up for lost time. I guess, question I just have a more general question is, whether it's wise to wait, a decade and a half before raising the rates, because when you do, you have to double them, and then everybody gets kind of ticked off. So, I don't know, I'm just wondering
Why we didn't raise rates earlier?
maybe every 5 years or something, so that when you do have to raise the rates, it's not such a large.
Did you want to answer that?
Yeah, just trying to get a microphone that works.
Okay.
If you could just step up here.
Yeah, that's a really valid question, and I think some of us can't speak to what happened 15 years ago, but what I would say is generally in there you had a lead up to the Great Recession. You had the Great Recession, and then you had clawing your way out of the Great Recession, and the city council as a body during that time was very respectful about people were losing their homes, people were losing their businesses. And we as staff got pretty clear direction to hold the line on fees and rates. And that's a piece of it, honestly. And so that continues over years, and then here you are, and you're woefully behind even the consumer price index. So it's probably a combination of factors, but the main one I can point to is that the recession happened just sort of right dab in the middle of this history, and there wasn't the political appetite or emotional desire to put people through rate increases or fees. So that's the honest answer. I mean, we're standing here in 2019 just presenting today's picture, so it's hard for me to speak historically, but if you want just my honest answer, that's how I think we got here. So.
What is that math? My bill is gonna more than double in the next 5 years. That's what you're actually arguing for. That's what all you politicians out there, if you're here, that's what you're gonna vote for and support. Say, this makes sense. It doesn't make sense.
And you have every right to protest the rate increase. If that's your belief, we're explaining the process of how to protest the rate increase. That's okay. It's okay if you're angry, it's okay if you don't want this to happen. It is your right as a property owner or as a utility customer to protest the rate. So Dave, why don't you finish out your presentation?
Yeah, let me just go through these. Oh, keep going backwards. So to the rates that you're speaking of, these are the proposed rates for solid waste for residents. They're
So what do you got against the low income people? You're really increasing their rates. I mean, a bigger percentage than you are the others.
That's the same percentage. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the same dollar amount, yes.
It's not the same percentage.
Right.
So it's gonna impact them a lot more. You got some of their rates going up like 250% over 5 years. So good job.
These are the commercial rates. Probably doesn't affect a lot of people here. One of the things that we restructured the commercial rates and our roll-off rates to better align with the cost of the service, so that we're not overcharging, we're not undercharging, and you'll see that in a minute on a chart.
Go back one.
Sure.
Down at the bottom, it talks about additional services. Let's go from $7.50 to $43.
Where you want to,
Let's see the bar, but just
yeah,
go
all the way up to 51.
2020. Let's go up to $43.
That's a commercial rate, and collecting a can from a commercial business requires a lot of different routing and different resources than it does to pick it up from your home. When we're picking up in a residential neighborhood, we're picking up one stop after another, very close together, and the routing process is very easy to do a whole street at a time. When we're adding a commercial stop to a residential route, the truck has to leave the residential route. We have to identify that stop individually on that route. So it takes more administrative work, and it takes more resources and more time for the driver and the truck.
That's some of the restructuring that we really dug down into the rates to look at. Does it really cost only $7.50 for one of our vehicles to leave a route, go over to a commercial building and pick up their garbage? No.
Have a separate truck that just does commercial only?
Oh, sure, we do. And that's what the rates are above that.
Okay, you make it sound like in the residential area, now I gotta go over to Smashburger.
Right, because that's the most efficient we could be, is to do that.
Because
it's in a can.
Yeah, because it's in a can.
It's not in
And
a
we-
bin. It's just a normal garbage can because it might be a small business. So let me continue on so we can get through these. Oh, I went back again, didn't I? So again, here's some of our additional charges for occurrences that are on our commercial rates. Our roll-off rates, we really looked at restructuring this. We found that our roll-off rates, as we compared to the region and what other jurisdictions were charging, were grossly out of balance.
Actually explain what a roll-off
A roll-off is a typical, it's a dumpster that's a big, long bin that's left in front that is picked up on the back of a truck and hauled away. So people use it a lot in demolition, renovations, that sort of thing. They throw it all into the big thing and it gets hauled away. It rolls off the back of the truck, as opposed to the commercial, which had the big forks that pick them up and dump them in. That's kind of the difference between a roll-off and a commercial. Because we weren't charging enough. Back to this gentleman's point, we probably should have adjusted these years ago, and they were just not. It's not a big part of the business that we do, so it wasn't worth kind of spending the money to go through that exercise to then come and raise them. But recently, just as a complete aside, we now have kind of brokers that do garbage that hire us and then deliver them to a resident and upcharge the resident because our rates are so low. Nearly double.
How is this going to affect our twice-a-year?
It is not going to affect it at all. And that's one of the things with our service levels that through our Utility Advisory Commission and City Council, they did not want to change our service levels at all. So we'll continue the three bulky waste pickups at no charge. Door-to-door household hazardous waste, all those stay the same.
Do we get 3 a year?
You get 3 a year. Again, these are, if you're interested, I'm going to go through these. If you're interested, please, they're on the website. So some of the frequently asked questions that I've received over the past few weeks, I think are some of them are important. We don't generate enough garbage. Can we go to biweekly service to reduce our bill? I touched on that earlier. We're mandated by the state to pick it up weekly. And although you may not produce that much garbage, I'm sure that others on your street do generate that much to be picked up weekly. And the true cost in a lot of this is showing up at your doorstep to pick up your garbage. It's not so much in the disposal. That is a small portion of it, but the cost of the vehicle and the driver and all the maintenance to get to your doorstep is the major cost driver. I've heard it's cheaper to just dispose of recycling the garbage. Can I just cancel? Again, it's the same answer. We're mandated by the state to provide them. We need to meet our diversion credits or we'll be fined by the state. If we can't get enough people to recycle and continue recycling, you're going to be charged for it anyways, so you might as well do it. We touched on this multiple times. No, they're not because of the plan area in South 50. Again, those capital costs are covered by development. I touched on this throughout the presentation. Some of the additional services, again, we got the unlimited door-to-door household hazardous waste, the 3 bulky item pickups per year, the holiday tree recycling, and other services include drop-off sites for household hazardous waste. We have retail drop-offs for universal waste, free sharps disposals. These are all services that many other jurisdictions do not provide. We're going to get into the debate about the graph again. This is a snapshot in time. This is a 64-gallon residential garbage. It shows where we sit in the region currently, where we're going to sit in January, or actually it's going to be February of 2020. We're not in this alone. There are other jurisdictions that not only currently charge more than we do for less services, but they're raising their rates as high, if not higher, than we're raising ours. This is a statewide issue that is coming, especially in solid waste, because of all the mandates. This is the commercial side I touched earlier. That's how far out of whack we are. The average is $693. We're sitting at $276. We're about $417 lower than the average region. I said it before, we're not alone. These are just kind of a snapshot of jurisdictions around the state that have undergone utility rate increases, specifically solid waste rates. The green on the screen there, I think it's green. The green is a negotiated extension to an existing contract, went up by 9%. The orange is a competitive procurement, which means they went out for a service of their solid waste. You know, those went from 11% to 54 in Piedmont to 59 in Santa Rosa. And then the blue is a detailed rate study similar to what we did. So you can see if we contracted out and contracted to a Waste Management or an Allied to do our services, we'd probably be looking at the rates in the orange there. That they would be up that much higher than we currently are looking at. We're a charter city, and we provide our own service for solid waste collection. If we were to contract that out like a franchise agreement, like was Rancho, Citrus Heights, Rancho Cordova, they contract out to have a company come in. If it was privatized, it'd be higher.
It would be higher.
And you would lose all those extra services that we provide, and we would have very little control on the service that they do provide. We don't start before 7 a.m.
Well, that's a state.
That's all I got.
All right.
So is there a way to get homeowners to maybe manage their garbage more efficiently as we did it doing with our water?
Yes, and you know, I said it earlier, we don't have the staffing. We haven't increased our staffing levels in solid waste in a number of years to actually begin that process and keep that process out in the forefront of people, because I think people got kind of, I don't want to say lazy, but got complacent about how they recycle, and you will see in the coming months and years a renewed effort for recycling education and outreach, because not only do we need to get people to recycle right. You'll see that tagline, recycle right, because when in doubt, throw it out. That's kind of the tagline that we're going to start using. Putting unrecyclable materials in recycling is just costing everybody money. If we can just get people to recycle clean, it will save money. What's that?
How are you going to get them to recycle clean?
Recycle properly. Education.
Just have those number codes
Yeah,
on a cheat sheet, because I'm constantly,
1, 2, or 3.
right, yeah, I have no idea. But also,
If in doubt, if you don't know if we recycle 4, 5, 6, or 7, throw it out. That's essentially what you need to do.
so what is the number?
1, 2, or 3.
1, 2, or
Those are golden.
that's it?
We take everything else. We take 4, 5, and
We take 1 through 7.
Yeah.
1 and 2 are really the two that are highly recyclable. Unfortunately, the number is just the type of resin that was used to make the item. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's recyclable, just to confuse things even more. So really, if you follow the guidelines on the brochure, if it's a bottle or a tub, then throw it in there. If it's like a plastic bag or styrofoam or things like that, throw them away. Any kind of flexible film type plastic or any plastic lids, we're asking those to be thrown away now, regardless of any number that might be on them.
yes.
The current solid waste rate, say for a 64-gallon trash can is 22 feet. So given the fact that the recycling market collapsed and you've got all these state mandates, so does this 22.50 or the rate for solid waste include the recycling cost?
It doesn't.
You don't charge for the recycling bin.
Correct. It includes the recycling costs that were mandated. That's part of the diversion mandate. Keep it out of the landfill, so recycling is the way to do it.
That cost includes both the solid waste, the so-called
Garbage.
and the recycling.
Correct.
So given this market collapse and the state mandates, it's probably going to have to be increased.
No, we accounted for that. We've accounted for that in this rate increase.
Okay.
Yeah. What we haven't accounted for is the organics recycling that's coming in by January of 2022. We just don't know what that looks like yet. We don't know what those costs are going to be. We don't know what the impacts are going to be. We don't even know what the operational side of it is really going to be for collection.
I have a question. Do you have somebody, if we put the wrong stuff in
We are currently mandated to monitor compliance, and we will be doing more and more of that, but we don't think, we'd rather enforce through education. So you're going to see an education outreach first, and then the enforcement side, where we'll actually have people coming, driving, inspecting what's in your cans. No, that's mandated. That is mandated by the state.
The wonderful state of California.
Yep. And again, if you have questions, please, my number on my card is out there. Email me, call me, and I'll get back to you. Yes, sir.
The rate study was done by HDR Engineering, is that correct?
Not for the solid waste. That was done by R3, an expert in recycling, and not recycling, but solid waste.
I thought I saw HDR Engineering on
They did the water and wastewater.
They did water and wastewater.
that. Either two of those companies, do they do other contracts with you?
HDR does.
R3 does not.
Okay.
HDR does design work for us for water and wastewater projects.
The only other work R3 has done for us was a operational analysis prior
That
to the
preceded
rate
this
study.
rate study. Okay.
So I think we dealt with a lot of questions during the presentation, which is very helpful, but I did want to just formally open it up to questions at this time for anyone on our panel. If you have anything about water, wastewater, solid waste, this process in general, please feel free to ask. We have a microphone right here that you can approach if you'd like to. Otherwise, we can bring the microphone to you. Does anyone have any additional questions other than what we've covered? All right. So in closing, I want to again thank you all for being here. If you would like to learn more about the proposed rate increases or anything we discussed tonight, please reach out to either Mr. Nugent or Mr. Yasutake. Their contact information is in the mailer you have. And if you haven't already, please take a look at the presentation boards along the back of the room. You will see boards dedicated to the rate setting process, regional rate comparisons, and basic information about each of our utilities, solid waste, water, and wastewater. Please also visit our website. We have dedicated to this issue and everything related to it, folsom.ca.us/utility rates, plural. On our website, you can find a copy of the mailer, a lot of additional information, and also frequently asked questions and answers. And we are video recording this presentation, and that video will be available on our website by the end of this week, and you'll see if you are following our social media platforms, we will be pushing out on our platforms, a link to go watch the video. So thank you very much and have a very good evening.